Welcome back. It has been a long time coming. Episode 4, Slants and Drags. I'm Alex Drake. That's Cameron Ryan. Cam, how you doing tonight?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Full disclosure, we tried to do this last night. It didn't go well. So it is now Wednesday, March 26th, and we are starting this over. So bear with us as we find our footing. But Cam, we had a press conference this week. Yesterday, Matt Rhule spoke. He said a lot of things, clarified some previous things he had said, specifically about your king Dylan Raiola's weight.
Right. Right.
Uh, so just so everybody's clear, Dylan Raiola did not ever weigh 240 pounds. Matt Rhule was saying he knows he can't be a good quarterback at 240 pounds. Didn't think that was a big issue, but the media did like to run with it in typical Nebraska media fashion. But let's get into it. This first topic, I added specifically because you sent me a photo of a specific player, and then today on my way into work, I heard Gary Sharp and Matt Masker talking about him on Gary and Matt in the morning. So media hype darlings. This is the time of year, spring practice, where we get a lot of names thrown at us. Unfortunately, historically, those names don't typically pan out. But Cam, who's the guy that you sent last night?
It was Keona Davis.
Okay, and what, apart from the picture where he absolutely looks the part of a dominant football player, what about Keona Davis has you excited?
Just the way that all the coaches talk about him. You know, you got media talking about him too, where they're like, "Oh, is this guy the next Adama Sue?" It just, I don't know, it just stands out. And then he looks the part. If a player looks the part, it only adds to the storyline. So,
Yeah, so I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm in wait and see mode on several guys on the defensive line. Keona Davis being one of them. There are some guys on the defense I'm super excited to see if they make a jump. Cam Lenhart had a little bit of a sophomore slump last season, and I think there's a variety of reasons for that. But I'm excited to see if he can make a jump this year, especially with a defensive line coaching change. Obviously, Willis McGahee the fourth, Willis McGahee Jr. We are excited. We are excited about him. My media hype darling comes back to a position that a lot of fans are worried about, specifically, and mainly because of a quote from Matt Rhule yesterday revolving around him: dynamic speed, and that is Mekhi Nelson. Mekhi Nelson's name came up a lot heading into the bowl game. Never got an opportunity to show what he could do. I'd love to see Mekhi Nelson get a good chunk of carries this year, but with Emmett Johnson being the guy, and I think Quentin Ives is going to be the second guy, and then I think it's going to be Jamarian Parker. I don't know where Mekhi is going to fit in unless he's a third down back.
right. For my media darling, I had Hardly Gilmore. Coming in from Kentucky, he was hurt his whole freshman campaign until the end of the year, but he was projected to start, right? So there's a lot of potential there. I did see something that I think Steve Sipple put out where he said he thinks that Gilmore will be wide receiver 3 or our third best wide receiver, and that being over Ja'Cory Barney, who put up, he was one of the top freshman receivers, obviously behind Jeremiah Smith, but he put up 50 plus receptions his freshman year. I feel like,
so let's talk about that. I know exactly what you're referencing. So Sipple put out his ranking of receivers in terms of where they're at, polished talent. And the way I read that, you're right. Barney was fourth. The way I read that was the three guys ahead of him, Dane Key, obviously Hardly Gilmore. Can't remember who the other one was.
Who's a hunter?
Yes, I believe it was. Anyways, the way I read that was all of those guys are more well-rounded and complete receivers today. Size, speed, ability to block, variation of routes. Whereas today, and we love Ja'Cory Barney around here, I still feel like Ja'Cory Barney is limited to a specific role within the offense. Um, Still going to be a jet sweep guy. He's going to be a slot guy, and that's fine. He's lethal in that role. That doesn't mean I think all three of the guys ahead of him are going to be utilized more in the offense. They have a different skill set, and so I'm not pushing back on Steve Sipple. I'm pushing back on fans that are up in arms about these rankings.
Yeah, I definitely see what you're saying. I just kind of took it more of as like, okay, you have Ja'Cory who shows you some production and he shows you what he can do. We don't really know what Gilmore could do. I haven't seen anything this year, like in spring of him, but I mean, they've
Yeah,
seen more than I have. So, I guess it's up into interpretation, like you said.
yeah, and I think he last year averaged like 26 yards per catch.
Yeah,
Was it per catch or per route ran?
I think
I don't
I think it
remember,
was
but
catch.
yeah, I mean, he's definitely a deep threat. He's definitely a bigger body. Um, and so that wide receiver room, I'm really excited to watch.
Yeah, no doubt.
So let's move on. Um, the next thing is Matt Rhule's impact on this program, and where do you stand on his leadership and the culture change that is happening? For me, I think it's obviously been a net positive. Um, but there was definitely a time middle of last season where I was selling stock. And I was selling stock for a variety of reasons, but he earned a lot of goodwill with me with the offensive coordinator change mid-season.
Yeah. I think with his culture change, it's put a lot of players into more of a disciplined mindset where I feel like he's holding people more accountable than, say, previous regimes. Like you said, with the OC firing mid-season, you never really see that. And I think with the discipline comes to our benefit in close games. And, Nebraska loves close games, but we just really have, I need to see the close games start to flip, at least like a couple of season. I need to see that to really buy in fully to the full culture change.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, my overall opinion of Matt Rhule and where he can take Nebraska hasn't really changed. Um, I For anybody who has not had this conversation with me, I'm going to be very honest right now. I don't think Matt Rhule will get Nebraska back to the mountaintop, and that is fine. I firmly believe that every coach has a ceiling, every program has a ceiling, and then they have a ceiling together. And so for me, when it comes to Matt Rhule, I think Matt Rhule is the kind of guy that comes in, builds the program up a lot, like Bo Pelini did. My hope is that eventually when Matt Rhule moves on, whether that is by his own volition or or the AD at that time decides it's time to move on, which I don't think would happen. I think the only way if Matt Rhule gets this thing back on track, the only way Matt Rhule leaves is on his own. But you got to nail that next hire, obviously, and Nebraska just hasn't done that. But I feel like Matt Rhule's the builder. I don't know if he's the guy that can climb the mountaintop, and that's fine. Nebraska needs to be rebuilt anyways. I love Matt Rhule. This is not a knock on Matt Rhule. This is just how I view the type of coach he is and where the program is today.
You know, contrary to what you say, I think Rhule could get to the top. I think we haven't seen what he does with NIL. We haven't seen what he does with the way the landscaping is changing. I think you could be right where, you know, he hasn't gotten to the mountaintop, but you know, there's always a chance he can. So I think it's a little less cut and dry than you make it out to seem.
That's fair, but I'm going to push back on the NIL thing here. This part of the press conference is where I lose a little bit of faith. He doesn't really have an answer for how it's going to look, which is fine. You don't know how it's going to look, but it feels like to me going into year 3 that this staff, this program, and this university is slow playing everything, and they're not going like gangbusters like the programs that are competing for the national titles are. And I think some of that's Matt Rhule. I think some of that is 1890. I don't know how much of it is Troy Dannon, because Troy Dannon was just the AD 2 years ago competing for a national title with Washington. So somewhere within all of this, there is some form of a disconnect. And if Matt Rhule is the CEO, some of that ownership falls on him.
Right. Bouncing off that point, I do think they're being more cautious because of moving towards the revenue sharing type of aspect, where Nebraska still, correct me if I'm wrong, operated at a profit after spending how much they did on their football team, unlike schools like that went balls to the wall, like Ohio State, Texas. I mean, granted, Ohio State did win a national title, but they operated at a net loss. I mean, I could be wrong, but I think that's how it happened. But
yeah, but Ohio State's loss, it has nothing to do with NIL or rev share. They had other things at play. They had less home games than they typically do. Played more neutral site games, things like that. So I'm gonna have to go back and reread the article, but they had planned for the loss. So that is totally separate from what's moving forward.
Okay.
But all that remains to be seen, right? Like, I love Matt Rhule. I love the trajectory of the program. I just think at a certain point he's going to plateau, and plateau might mean a playoff team. That doesn't mean Nebraska is not going to compete for a playoff. I just don't think you're going to. I don't think you're going to have the Tom Osborne effect with him, where you played for a few national titles, you didn't win any, and then you got over the hill. And the biggest part of that, Cam, is not because of Matt Rhule. It's because of the landscape of college football today. Coaches don't get the runway that Tom Osborne got, especially at places that demand championships. Now, Nebraska's not demanding a championship right now. They are demanding to compete for a conference championship, which is, you're a little bit younger than me. I never thought we'd be here growing up. And so I'm hoping that when Nebraska gets back to the point where they're competing for conference titles all the time, that the fan base remembers these times and we don't run a good coach out like Matt Rhule.
If we ever got to that point, I don't think I would ever want to remember these times again. The majority of my lifetime.
But you have to, man. Otherwise you turn into what you are today. If you continue to run out good coaches. Now, granted, there's another school that has done it, and they've been in the playoff twice in a row. Texas. Texas has fired just as many coaches as Nebraska over the last 20 years. So, the key is nailing the hires, which Nebraska just absolutely has it.
Yeah.
So, all right. That's kind of all the big things that I wanted to talk about. We kind of blended the last two together. Anything on your mind that you want to get off your chest?
I guess the biggest talking point I've had since, spring ball kind of started, was how you think the offense is going to look going into the fall. Whether Matt Rhule said in his press conference, I think his ideal is 50-50 run pass, but I just have a feeling it's going to be more towards a 55% plus in the passing department. I mean, that's all dependent on how Dylan looks, along with the wide receiver improvement, specifically with Shorts and actually teaching our wide receivers to catch the ball. But I don't know how you think that'll look.
I think 50-50 is impossible. You can't be really good. Like, you cannot be a dominant offense and be 50-50 or even 55-45. Like, you just can't. Most of the best offenses in college football today are closer to 60-40, even 70-30 pass to run. Now, the thing that I'm most curious about is how that passing game develops. From last season, one of my biggest gripes was the route tree combinations. We didn't really create a lot of easy throws. We didn't matter the play call. It was almost the same couple of routes every time. Under Dana, that looked a lot better. I think you're going to probably be closer to 60-40, 70-30 pass run. Now, that doesn't mean it's going to be the old school Dana Holgorsen, West Virginia run and gun. I think you're going to see some successful running back screens for the first time in a while. I think you're going to see some successful tunnel screens. I think you're going to see successful swing passes. I think you're going to see slants, drags, all my favorite things. You're going to see easy 2 to 3 yards in front of the line of scrimmage type throws. And we've talked about this in the past. A lot of it was route tree combination, but one of my biggest critiques for Dylan was when a lot of the passes he completed, he put on guys and didn't give them a chance to create after the catch. And I think that's going to be a big focal point in the offense moving forward. And when you can do that stuff effectively, it creates the running game. So I think you're going to see less run attempts, but significantly better yards per carry.
I almost stopped you. I heard you say successful swing passes, and I feel like I felt all of Husker Nation kind of just like tense up.
Yeah.
For 7 years straight, we see swing passes with minimal success. It's hard to imagine what that even looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I think the last successful swing pass was Tamarius Washington running down the sideline at Illinois. But I think you're going to see some wheel routes. I just think you're going to see a more creative game plan offensively, and you're going to see an offensive coordinator that is dedicated to scheming the ball into the right guy's hands at the right time. And when I say scheme, I don't mean, Ja'Cory Barney's in, we're going to run a jet sweep, or Heinrich Harburg is in at tailback, we're going to hand it off to him for him to throw it back to Dylan for Dylan to throw a 10-yard crosser. Like, we're gonna scheme things. You're gonna see things set up, right? Like the running play that you run 7 times throughout the first half, later on in the game, they're gonna run a play action off of that instead of just a random play action here, and we're gonna try and run it up the center's asshole 19 times a game. Like, things are going to be cohesive. Things are going to build off of each other. I don't know if it's going to be built out of a pro style offense. I don't know if it's going to be built out of a spread offense. I think Dana Holgorsen's here to reinvent himself a little bit. But the beautiful thing about what Dana Holgorsen does overall is he can blend that style into any base package, right? Like, route tree combinations are route tree combinations. So whether that's out of a pro style offense, a spread offense, it doesn't matter. He can build all of that together. So if you want to go 2 or even 3 tight end sets, which we saw him do a little bit towards the end of the year, you can still create an effective passing game.
As long as I'm seeing mesh concepts and flood concepts spammed over and over and over, I think we'll all be happy individuals.
Man, if I see 3 slants a game, I'm gonna go to bed happy every Saturday. I promise you. Instead of 3 slants a season, give me 3 slants a game. So, all right, ladies and gentlemen, that's gonna do it for us. Thank you so much for joining us. Be sure to follow us on Twitter and YouTube, X and YouTube, and get your questions in for next week. Thanks. Bye.